Good morning. Evidence linking antibiotic usage in livestock and antimicrobial resistance, AMR for an abbreviation, in humans, a PRISMA style review. My name's Alice Williams and my supervisor is Professor Martin Sheldon. Okay, let's begin with an introduction. By 2050, experts predict up to 10 million people per year will die as a result of antimicrobial resistance. A bold statement. Let's reverse back to a brief introduction. So, antimicrobials, these can include antibiotics, antivirals, antifungals and antiparasitics. The antimicrobial resistance is the resistance of the microorganism to these drugs, which was originally effective for treatment of infections caused by that microorganism. So what's the knowledge gap around here? So we really want to find out is what the actual contribution of this antimicrobial use in food animals in the development of AMR in infections affecting people is. Why is this important? Well, new resistance mechanisms, they're emerging and spreading, making this an increasingly serious threat to global public health. A lot of the blame has been placed on the shoulders of farmers, but is that really where we should lay the blame? The aim of my project is to survey the evidence available linking antibiotic usage in meat and milk producing livestock, these include pigs, poultry, sheep and cattle, to antimicrobial resistance in humans through a PRISMA style review. Antibiotics are used in meat or milk producing animals to treat infections and illnesses. The antibiotics kill most of the bacteria, however some antibiotic resistant bacteria survive and multiply. They have 3 routes of transmission into the human population: direct or occupational contact, foodborne or milk, and environmental. These are the 3 I shall be investigating today. Next, I'm going to discuss my methods. In building my PRISMA style review, I had 5 steps. So I began with my initial literature search. So I there had a look around the topic and different papers about the topic. I then moved on to identify my key terms. In my PRISMA, I have used mesh terms, and my mesh terms used are here, which are livestock, poultry, antimicrobial drug resistance, antibacterial agents, and humans. Following this, I was able to make my paper selection. I then found my inclusion/exclusion criteria and performed a data extraction on all my papers. So finally, I came up with an Excel database, and this was made in order to extract all the key data that I needed from each paper to then begin writing my PRISMA style review. Let's take a look at the results I gathered in my data extraction. So here I have my PRISMA flow diagram. I started off with 257 records identified through database searching and an additional 49 records. Following this, I removed the duplicates and ended up with 262 papers. I then excluded 84 papers, which included reviews or letters, leaving me with 178 papers. Following this, I assessed them for their eligibility and used my exclusion and inclusion criteria, bringing it down to 36 papers, which I then removed 2 of, which were case reports, and finalised with my final 34 papers that I included in my quantitative synthesis. 87% of papers found evidence of animal-to-human transmission of AMR. So it's worth noting first that multiple papers reported more than one species, and hence the higher number in my graph. So this graph here is showing the species of animal and its transmission status, whether it was animal to human or whether no transmission was found. The graph shows that poultry and pigs were the most investigated species within my paper cohort. 4 in 5 papers provided evidence of transmission of AMR for specific antibiotics and bacteria. Note here is that multiple papers reported more than one antibiotic and some investigated more than one bacteria. Starting with the graph on the left, this is where the number of antibiotics reported and their transmission status information is provided. So were 13 antibiotic classes reported. The most significantly investigated antibiotic here was the beta-lactams. So moving over here to the right, we've got the bacteria reported and their transmission status. The most significant bacteria investigated here was E. coli, with 74% of studies focusing on E. coli solely and finding evidence of transmission from animals to humans. And it is worth noting here that any papers reporting no transmission were only looking at E. coli as well. 50% of papers investigated foodborne transmission. So the note here is that multiple papers reported more than one species and some investigated more than one transmission route. So the graph here is showing the 3 different routes of transmission and how many papers reported on them. As we can see here that the foodborne transmission is the most reported. This can be followed by direct/occupational contact, so these people working in the agricultural sector, slaughtermen and farmers, and finally environmental transmission. This is the lowest reported group, and this could be significant because at the moment the focus is solely on foodborne transmission within the government and also direct/occupational contact. So, finally moving on to my discussion and conclusions of my capstone project. So, on to the discussion. There is strong evidence of animal to human transmission of AMR, with 87% of the papers in my review supporting this. 4 in 5 papers found evidence of transmission of AMR for specific antibiotics. These included the beta-lactams, macrolides, tetracyclines and fluoroquinolones, and bacteria, which the most significant was E. coli, bringing me on to my third point, in which 74% of papers investigating E. coli found evidence of transmission. However, E. coli was the only bacteria that papers found there was no transmission. 2/3 of papers investigated the link between antibiotic use in poultry and pigs and AMR. This could be a significant area for future research due to the species and their nature. In conclusion, answering my aim, more than 80% of papers linked antibiotic usage in meat and milk producing livestock, from pigs, poultry, sheep and cattle, to antimicrobial resistance in humans. On the following slide, you'll see all my references. Here is a list of references. I'd like to know all images used on my own from Life on the Farm. Thank you. Any questions?